The insistent chirping dragged Alex from sleep. He slammed his hand down, silencing the alarm. 6 a.m. Tuesday. He dragged himself out of bed, the same Tuesday routine looming. Shower, cereal, bus. Everything felt eerily familiar, like an echo of yesterday.
Was it just me, or was something off about this Tuesday?
Alex shrugged off the feeling as he waited for the bus. Same spot. Same grumpy lady with the oversized handbag. Same screeching brakes as the bus pulled up. He boarded, the familiar smell of stale coffee and damp seats washing over him. He glanced at a newspaper headline, "Local team wins big." He could have sworn he had read that yesterday. The bus rumbled on, each bump and turn strangely predictable. He reached his stop and got off, the feeling of déjà vu intensifying. He walked towards his college building, the rhythm of his steps echoing in his ears. The same black cat darted across his path, making him jump. Wait, hadn't this happened already? Classes seemed to blur together, each day indistinguishable from the last. The same monotonous lectures, the same disinterested faces, and the same sense of time dragging on endlessly. He found himself answering questions automatically, the words leaving his mouth before he could process them. It was as if his mind was on autopilot, his responses pre-programmed and devoid of any real thought or emotion. It was as if he was living a pre-recorded tape, every word, every action, predetermined. His movements were mechanical, his daily routine a series of motions he had performed countless times before. He glanced at his watch, 12:15 p.m., the same time every day, marking the midpoint of his monotonous routine. Time for his usual lunch break at the park across the street. The walk was short, but it felt like a brief escape from the confines of the classroom. The park was bathed in the warmth of the midday sun, a stark contrast to the cold, sterile environment of the classroom. The sunlight felt like a small comfort, a reminder that there was still life outside his repetitive routine. He sat on his usual bench, the worn-out wood familiar under his touch. It was his sanctuary, a place where he could momentarily forget the monotony of his daily life. He unwrapped his sandwich, the same ham and cheese he had yesterday. The routine was comforting in its predictability, yet stifling in its sameness. He took a bite, the taste mechanical, devoid of any real pleasure. It was sustenance, nothing more, a necessary part of his daily cycle.
Something was wrong, terribly wrong. A sense of unease settled over him, a feeling that he couldn't shake.
He looked around, his heart pounding in his chest. The park, usually a place of solace, now felt eerie and unsettling. The same kids were playing frisbee, their laughter echoing in the air. It was a scene he had witnessed countless times, yet today it felt different, almost surreal. The same old man was feeding pigeons, his wrinkled face etched with time. The familiarity of the scene was comforting, yet it added to the growing sense of unease. The same couple was arguing on a nearby bench, their voices rising and falling in a familiar pattern. It was as if the entire park was stuck in a loop, repeating the same scenes over and over. This wasn't just déjà vu, this was a repeat, a loop. He was trapped in a cycle, reliving the same day, the same moments with no end in sight. The realization hit him like a wave, overwhelming and inescapable. He needed to find a way out, to break free from the endless repetition. But how? The answer eluded him, leaving him feeling more lost and confused than ever before. Panic clawed at his throat. He was trapped. The walls seemed to close in on him, the air thick with the weight of his predicament. Stuck in a time loop, forced to relive the same day over and over again. Each morning, the same alarm, the same breakfast, the same mundane conversations. He remembered reading about this in some science fiction stories, but he never thought it could be real. Those tales were just fiction, right? Yet here he was, living a nightmare straight out of a novel. And yet here he was, living the impossible. Every detail, every moment, a cruel repetition of the last. The same faces, the same words, the same actions. He had to find a way out, a way to break free from this prison of repetition. He couldn't bear the thought of another identical day. The urgency gnawed at him, pushing him to search for answers.
How do I escape this? How do I break the cycle? The questions echoed in his mind, each one more desperate than the last. How do I break free? He tried everything he could think of, but every door was locked, every puzzle unsolvable.
He spent the rest of the day in a daze, going through the motions, each action feeling robotic. His colleagues noticed his distant demeanor, but their concern was just another part of the loop. His attempts to deviate from his routine yielded no results. No matter what he did, the day reset, mocking his efforts. He tried ordering a different meal at the cafeteria, but the server insisted he always had the chicken pot pie. It was as if the universe itself conspired to keep him in this loop. He tried taking a different route home, but he always ended up at his doorstep, as if guided by an invisible hand. The streets twisted and turned, but they all led back to the same place. He looked at his reflection in the mirror that night. The same worried eyes stared back at him, reflecting his growing despair. He felt like a ghost, haunting his own life. The same worried eyes stared back at him, reflecting his growing despair. Each day, the weight of his situation grew heavier, pressing down on him. He was a prisoner in his own life. The walls of his home, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage. The familiar surroundings offered no comfort, only a reminder of his entrapment. Unless he could figure out how to break free, he was doomed to repeat this Tuesday for eternity. The calendar mocked him, the date never changing, the clock hands frozen in time.
But how? How could he possibly find a way out of this endless loop? The confusion was overwhelming, the answers elusive. Where do I even begin? He sat at his desk, staring blankly at the computer screen, the cursor blinking mockingly. The weight of his predicament bore down on him, but he knew he had to keep searching, keep trying, no matter how hopeless it seemed.
The next morning, the insistent chirping of his alarm clock announced the start of yet another identical Tuesday. The sound was almost mocking in its regularity, a reminder of the monotonous cycle he found himself trapped in. Alex woke up with a groan. He was tired of the same routine, the same faces, the same conversations. Every day felt like a carbon copy of the one before, and the weight of it all was starting to crush his spirit. Tired of the same routine, the same faces, the same conversations. The predictability of his life had become suffocating, and he longed for something, anything, to break the monotony. He felt like he was living in a loop, where every action was predetermined and every outcome was the same. He had to find a way to break the loop, and today he was determined to make a real difference. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he was ready to take the first step, no matter how small. He had to believe that change was possible, that he could carve out a new path for himself. Instead of grabbing his usual cereal, he made himself a proper breakfast: scrambled eggs, toast, and a glass of orange juice. It was a small change, but it felt significant. As he cooked, he felt a sense of control, a feeling that he could shape his day in a new way. He put on a different shirt, a bright red one he usually reserved for special occasions. The color made him feel more alive, more visible. It was a statement, a declaration that today would be different. He felt a flicker of hope. Maybe these small changes would be enough to disrupt the loop. Maybe they would be the start of something bigger, something transformative. Maybe these small changes would be enough to disrupt the loop. He decided to experiment with his routine, to see if he could find new ways to approach his day. He tried new things, broke old habits, and looked for opportunities to inject a bit of novelty into his life. He decided to skip the bus and walk to college instead. The walk gave him time to think, to reflect on his life and the changes he wanted to make. It was a small act of rebellion against the predictability of his daily commute. The fresh air felt good against his skin, and he allowed himself a small smile. Change. It was a simple word, but it held so much promise. He felt a sense of freedom, a feeling that he could shape his own destiny. He needed to embrace change, however small, if he wanted to see a different outcome. He realized that change didn't have to be dramatic or immediate. It could be gradual, a series of small steps that would eventually lead to a new path. He just had to believe that breaking free was possible. He had to trust in his ability to create a new reality for himself, to envision a future that was different from his present. He couldn't give up hope, not yet. He knew that the journey would be challenging, but he was ready to face it head-on. He was determined to hold on to his hope, to nurture it and let it guide him through the difficult times. Not yet. He sighed, feeling a mix of frustration and determination. He knew that breaking the pattern would take time and effort, but he was ready to commit to the journey. He was ready to fight for a life that was truly his own. During lunch, he found himself drawn to the park again. He sat on his usual bench, but this time he didn't feel the same sense of dread. Maybe it was the hope he had kindled within him, the hope that he could change his destiny. He noticed the old man he always saw feeding the pigeons. Today, he decided to approach him. The old man looked up as Alex approached, his eyes surprisingly bright and alert for someone his age.
Hi.
Alex hesitated, unsure how to begin. The old man smiled, a knowing glint in his eyes.
Lost, are you?
He rasped, his voice surprisingly strong. Alex was taken aback. How did he know?
I don't understand.
He stammered. The old man chuckled, a low rumbling sound.
Time is a river, young man. Sometimes it loops, but even rivers find their way back to the sea. Look within, fix what's broken. Only then will the river flow.